Hello and welcome to the interview. Our guest is a former CIA agent who spent time in Pakistan in the 1980s. He's also a psychiatrist, a political analyst. He specialized in political violence. He has written several books. The last one is called Misunderstanding Terrorism. It's published by University of Pennsylvania. Thank you very much for being on the show, Marc Sageman.
It's my honor.
Obviously, we're going to talk mostly about terrorism, about the so-called jihadist phenomenon. Just in recent days, France has arrested women and teenagers suspected of terrorist plots. Generally, the thinking is a terrorist is male and older. Is this something new, or has this been seen before?
This has unfortunately been seen before. I'm here in France. It's a country of Charlotte Corday. And the first real terrorist was actually a female, French female, if you really think about it. So no, if you look at 230 years of political violence, non-state political violence in peacetime, you see that women were participant in about 35 to 40% of the cases. So in this wave of political violence is what I call the global neo-jihadi terrorism wave of political violence. Women are absent from the front line in terms of blowing themselves up or killing people. We have a few exceptions, like Belgian or Palestinian or Chechen women. But the real question here is, why are women absent from this wave of terrorism? They have a very strong function, a support function, but they weren't in the front line in terms of shooting and killing. I believe it's because men wanted to keep the glory of the fight to themselves and prevented women from participating in the killing. Now, with the decrease of control by men, it's really a bottom-up phenomenon, not really a top-down. What you have is women can really come into their own, and having women doing this is probably going to be the wave of the future.
Obviously not very reassuring. We are ongoing terrorist attacks have become really the daily life of many people in the world. I'm not going to go through all the attacks we've seen. Back in 2008, you already wrote about the leaderless jihad. It seems to be the case right now with ISIS replacing maybe Al-Qaeda, but it goes even beyond that, it seems.
Yes. You know, people are very impressionistic, and so they're impressed by a huge case. 9/11 very much focused our thinking, and 9/11 was an attack brought by 19 foreigners to the West. And so at first people thought that perhaps foreigners would predominate. But since the Madrid bombing and the London bombing, I saw the trend becoming much more decentralized and really having bottom-up, homegrown terrorists coming to the fore. And that really is what happened the last 8 years.
Right. There's a big debate here in France. Some call it a little bit academic between two scholars, especially, to know whether what's happening now is the Islamization of radicalism, or if it's a radicalization of Islam. In a way, if it's just the violence that's taking an Islamic guise, or if it is really inside Islam. What's your take on this?
Well, as usual, French people love being abstract. It's a country of philosophers and mathematicians, and they like to argue about nothing. And so, to me, I'm an American, I'm an empiricist, so I'm fairly close to the facts and to really see what's happening. And I think both notions are both true and false. So it's really not a very fruitful argument to have.
Right, but do you think that there is a problem? For instance, in the United States, Barack Obama is criticized by some people on the right, of course, but even on the left for not naming things properly. Do you think it's important, or do you think it's irrelevant?
It's irrelevant. It's not why people become terrorists. It's not why. The focus of my work is trying to understand why young people turn to violence.
So why do they do this?
Well, it's actually both a complicated and a simple process. It's a process. So we kind of look at processes. The process is actually very simple. First of all, you have the acquisition of a politicized social identity, such as I'm part of this imagined community, the Ummah, for instance, in this case. It's not an imaginary community, it's an imagined community, just like a nation is an imagined community. So it's really very real. But under three conditions, people may then turn to violence. The first condition is the escalation of conflict between that community, that political protest community, and the state and the rest of society. And the escalation includes very vile extremist rhetoric with warlike metaphors. And this is very bad because the solutions within that type of frame are all extreme, both from the state and from the potential terrorist. The second is the disillusionment with legal forms of protest, which they feel are totally ineffective. And the third is a sense of moral outrage from state aggression against the community. And in that instance, very few people volunteer to become soldiers defending their attacked community, and soldiers kill. And so when you start having this martial social identification, that's really where you are at the point where they turn to violence.
Right, but it seems in recent years things have accelerated. You have people, according to what we read about, who are getting radicalized very quickly. Some drug dealers, suddenly from one day to the other, they stop dealing drugs, they start praying, and then off they go. And so it seems things are getting much quicker. It's not so much of a process as maybe a trend in a way.
It is a process. A process can take 1 second. To identify with something can be immediate. You don't need any type of brainwashing. You don't need any type of indoctrination or anything like that. It's a process of identification. And so there's really no acceleration. I don't really understand why earlier people believed that it was going to be a long indoctrination. It is not that. It is really very much a political process. People tend to forget the political dimension. They talk about religion, they talk about psychology, they talk about a lot of things, except politics. Political violence is first and foremost political. And it's very much an identification with your own group that you feel is endangered, and therefore you are going to protect them and defend them. It's the
Isn't
same
this
process.
a way of excusing them, maybe?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They have full criminal responsibility for what they do. I'm just trying to understand the process. And it's a very similar process to a volunteer army. If people go and volunteer and join the army for their own nation, their own imagined community, and then go out and kill, it's really very much the same process. When you talk to those young people, they tell you they are mujahid, or mujahideen, plural, and that's why they kill. Soldiers kill.
Family is often important. There are examples of brothers, the Tsarnaev in the Boston Marathon bombing, the Kouachi brothers here in France, al-Bakraoui in Brussels. Clearly, the family, maybe especially in traditional culture, is an incubator of terrorism, and also makes it more difficult for law enforcement to track them down.
Actually, in this wave of terrorism, family is not very important. Siblings are important. Friends are important. In my first book, I talked that people join these social networks through friendship and kinship. It is still true. It has been true forever. It's true from the time of the French Revolution, where people joined the Journée Révolutionnaire on the basis of friendship and kinship. It's really, those friends and kin form your group, your imagined community, and if they are attacked, you're going to defend them. So there's nothing new here. It's just our perception that is changing about it.
France recently opened a so-called de-radicalization center recently. There have been other experiences elsewhere in the world. What's the record for those centers? Is it just merely a way to reassure the general population?
The French Center in Indre-et-Loire is something new. I mean, it's going to be 10 months. The curriculum is an interesting one. But the point is that most of the advisors don't really understand the process of radicalization. And I really hate the term because the term means two things. It means the acquisition of extreme ideas, and it also means the turning to political violence, le passage à l'acte, as they say here. The two are very different. Some people with extreme ideas become violent. The vast majority with extreme ideas do not become violent. And some people are violent who don't have these ideas, and most people do have those ideas. So you can see there's no one-to-one correlation. That center is focused on just the ideas and not really the turn to violence. So I'm open-minded, but none of the other programs that I know of, including the Saudis, Singaporean, most of the Prevent in Great Britain, none of them work.
Okay, Marc Sageman, thank you very much for coming on the France 24/7. Thank you for watching this edition of The Interview. Stay tuned for more news.